During midnight in Terre Haute, Indiana, inside the federal death chamber, the tension is at a breaking point. For the first time since 1953, the U.S. government is preparing to execute a woman. Lisa Montgomery sits in an eerie, frozen stillness, refusing sedatives. Guards log her every move under the constant glare of non-stop lights. To the DOJ, she is a predator guilty of staggering cruelty. To her lawyers, she's the most broken of the broken, too ill to grasp her fate. A storm of legal stays was swept away by a relentless Supreme Court. At 1:31 a.m., the chemicals flow, ending a life defined by a lifetime of torture. Was this justice or the final failure of a society that never protected her? This is the story of Lisa Montgomery. To those who didn't know the darkness of her private life, Lisa Marie Montgomery appeared to be an ordinary woman from Melbourne, Kansas. She was a mother of 4, a wife, and an active member of the online dog breeding community. But underneath that domestic surface was a woman struggling with profound psychological fractures. Friends and family saw someone who was warm and devoted. Yet her husband later recalled a disturbing pattern of deception. Lisa had falsely claimed to be pregnant multiple times over the years. She lived in a world of disassociation, often slipping in and out of reality. Doctors would later diagnose her with a cocktail of severe conditions, including bipolar disorder, PTSD, and psychosis. To the outside world, she was a puppy enthusiast and a neighbor. To medical experts, she was a woman whose mind had been shattered by a lifetime of abuse that made her deeply mistrustful of the world around her. By December 2004, Lisa's carefully constructed lie was about to explode. For months, she had told her family and her husband, Kevin, that she was pregnant. She wore maternity clothes, she talked about ultrasound appointments, but it was a physical impossibility. Over a decade earlier, Lisa had been permanently sterilized. The pressure reached a breaking point on December 14th, just 48 hours before the crime. Her ex-husband, Carl Bowman, filed a motion for custody of the children. He knew she wasn't pregnant, and he threatened to expose her deception in court. Lisa's response was desperate. "I will prove you wrong." Lisa logged on to a dog breeding message board under the alias Darlene Fisher. She targeted 23-year-old Bobbie Jo Stinnett, a young woman who was 8 months pregnant and selling rat terrier puppies. On December 16th, Lisa drove across the state line. In her pocket, she carried a kitchen knife and a white cord. Bobbie Jo's mother later described the scene she found, only an hour after Lisa arrived. Her daughter was on the floor, the dining room covered in blood. It looked, she told the 911 operator, like Bobbie Jo's stomach had exploded.
911, what is your emergency? What's wrong?
To the world, Lisa Montgomery was a calculated predator, a woman who had orchestrated a crime of staggering cruelty. But to the experts who peered into the wreckage of her past, she was a survivor of unrelenting sexual torture, the most broken of the broken. Her life wasn't just a series of hardships. It was a systematic dismantling of a human soul that began when she was only 3 years old. By the age of 11, the person who should have been her protector, her stepfather, became her primary tormentor. He was a mean drunk who eventually built a specialized room onto the side of their trailer, deep in the Oklahoma woods. It had its own entrance, a feature designed for one purpose, so he could come and go as he pleased without anyone ever hearing Lisa's screams. Inside that room, the abuse was total. When Lisa tried to resist, her stepfather slammed her head against the concrete floor with such violence that it left her with a permanent traumatic brain injury. Modern MRI and PET scans would later reveal the physical scars of this childhood, structural and functional abnormalities in her limbic system and somatomotor regions. This is the part of the brain that regulates aggression, emotion, and the very sense of self. But the betrayal didn't end with her stepfather. Her mother, Judy, didn't offer a sanctuary. She offered Lisa's body as currency. When the family needed a plumber or an electrician, Judy would sell her daughter to pay for the repairs. On the rare occasion her mother did intervene, it was with more violence, once holding a gun to Lisa's head and screaming at her after catching her husband in the act of assault. Society, too, looked the other way. Doctors, social workers, and even a family court judge were made aware of the rapes and the alcohol abuse, yet no one reached out to save her. She was isolated, brainwashed, and humiliated, made to stand naked on a porch or beaten until she bled. By the time she reached adulthood, Lisa wasn't just damaged. She was profoundly mentally ill. By 2004, the year of the crime, experts say Lisa existed in a constant state of dissociation. She lived in a psychological fog, slipping in and out of a reality she could no longer bear to inhabit. Her obsession with pregnancy wasn't a ploy to the defense. It was pseudopsychosis, a rare somatoform disorder where the mind creates a delusion so powerful the body begins to mimic the physical signs of labor. In her shattered mind, the baby wasn't a target, it was a lifeline, a way to finally belong to a world that had only ever treated her like trash. This wasn't a woman acting out of malice, her lawyers argued, but a woman acting out of a severe mental disease born from a lifetime of torture. When Lisa Montgomery stood trial in 2007, the ticking clock wasn't just in the execution chamber, it was in the hands of a defense team that many say was doomed from the start. Her lead attorney had the grim distinction of having more clients sentenced to federal death than any other lawyer in America. They bet everything on a rare psychological diagnosis, pseudopsychosis, a phantom pregnancy so intense the body actually mimics labor. But the prosecution was ready. They branded her history of trauma as the abuse excuse. They argued that her elaborate plan, the puppies, the alias, the kitchen knife, wasn't the work of a delusional woman, but a cold, calculating predator. The jury didn't see the structural abnormalities in her brain or the PET scans showing a limbic system scarred by childhood torture. The judge excluded the most critical scientific evidence, ruling it would only confuse the jury. Fast forward to the early hours of January 13th, 2021. The legal roller coaster reached its final drop. A judge in Indiana had halted the execution for a mental competency hearing just hours before, but the Supreme Court swept the lifeline away. Lisa was led into the chamber. As a staffer removed her face mask and asked for her last words, she gave a single, muffled response: no. Witnesses noted her fingers tapping rhythmically against the gurney straps, a final subconscious sign of a mind that had been vibrating with tension for 52 years. At 1:31 a.m., the federal government pronounced Lisa Montgomery dead. Her lawyer, Kelly Henry, called it a vicious, unlawful exercise of authoritarian power against a woman who was the most broken of the broken. The execution of Lisa Marie Montgomery closed a chapter of horrific violence, but it left behind a haunting legacy, a reminder that sometimes the law is as cold and clinical as the crimes it seeks to punish. Lisa Montgomery's story didn't end with a confession. It ended in a soft, muffled no and a final rhythmic tap of her fingers against a gurney. Her death closed a chapter of horrific violence, but it opened a debate that still haunts the American legal system. When we execute the most broken among us, are we protecting society, or are we simply burying the evidence of our own systemic failures? If stories that challenge the boundaries of justice and psychology matter to you, stay with us. Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications to join us for more deep dives into the cases that define our world. Because in the shadows of true crime, there is always another chapter waiting to be told.